The sound of Derek's laughter wasn't just loud, it was destructive. It bounced off the mahogany walls of the conference room, stripping away 10 years of marriage in a single cruel moment. He wasn't just leaving Evelyn, he was enjoying it. He pointed at her trembling hands as she signed the papers that left her with nothing but a beat-up sedan and a suitcase of clothes while he kept the mansion, the stocks, and the life they built together. "Look at her," he sneered to his lawyer. "She's terrified. She wouldn't survive a day in the real world without my credit card." Derek thought the story ended there. He thought he had discarded a broken woman. But he forgot one crucial detail: Evelyn wasn't crying because she was weak. She was crying because she knew exactly who and what she was about to unleash. And when he saw her 3 weeks later stepping out of a Rolls-Royce Phantom on the arm of the city's most elusive billionaire, Derek didn't laugh. He stopped breathing. The air conditioning in the law offices of Stratton Miller and Associates was set to a freezing temperature, but it was nothing compared to the chill radiating from the man sitting across the table. Derek Vance adjusted the cuffs of his Italian silk suit, a smug grin plastered on his face. He looked like a man who had just closed the deal of the century, not a man who was ending a decade-long marriage to the woman who had nursed him through pneumonia, edited his business proposals, and managed his life so he could climb the corporate ladder. "Are we done here?" Derek asked, checking his Rolex. "I have a reservation at Le Bernardin at 8. I'd hate to be late." Evelyn sat opposite him, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple gray dress, one she had owned for 5 years. She looked small in the oversized leather chair. To the lawyers present, she looked like the quintessential defeated housewife, aging tired and out of her depth. Just one more signature, Mrs. Vance. Derek's lawyer. A shark-eyed man named Mr. Henderson said smoothly. He slid the document across the polished oak table. "This confirms that you waive all rights to the Vance Holdings shares and the property in the Hamptons in exchange for the lump sum alimony payment of $50,000. $50,000. It was an insult. It was less than what Derek spent on his country club membership in a single year. But Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't scream. She had spent the last 6 months listening to Derek tell her she was worthless, that she had contributed nothing to his success, and that she was merely a parasite he was tired of feeding. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, though Derek interpreted it that way, but from a mixture of rage and adrenaline. "Go on, Evelyn," Derek goaded, leaning forward. His eyes danced with malice. "Sign it. Release yourself from the burden of trying to keep up with me. We both know you were never cut out for this altitude. You're a small-town girl who got lucky. The luck just ran out." Evelyn looked up, locking eyes with him. "Is that what you think this was? Luck?" Derek laughed, a sharp barking sound. "Of course. You think you helped? Because you made sure my socks were matched? Because you hosted a few dinner parties? Evelyn, please. I built this empire. I am the brand. You were just decoration. And frankly, the decoration has gone out of style." He turned to Mr. Henderson and chuckled. "Look at her face. She's terrified. She's realizing that tomorrow morning she has to actually work for a living. It's pathetic, really." Evelyn looked down at the paper. She could fight this. She knew where the bodies were buried, financially speaking. She knew about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. She knew about the shell company Vortex Solutions that he used to funnel money out of the joint account. But fighting meant dragging this out. Fighting meant staying connected to Derek for another year. And she didn't want his money. She wanted something else. She wanted him to realize on his own exactly what he had lost. She signed her name, Evelyn Marie Vance. "There," she whispered. Derek snatched the papers before the ink was even dry, scanning them to ensure she hadn't tried any tricks. "Finally," he breathed out, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "You have until noon tomorrow to get the rest of your things out of the house. I'm having the locks changed at 12:01. "I'm already packed," Evelyn said quietly, standing up. She grabbed her purse. "Good." Derek didn't even look at her. He was already typing on his phone, likely texting Sasha, the 24-year-old marketing intern he had been mentoring for the last 6 months. "Oh, and Evelyn?" She paused at the heavy glass door. "Don't come crawling back when the money runs out," he called out, not bothering to lower his voice. "I don't do charity." Evelyn didn't look back. She walked out of the office past the receptionists, who looked at her with pity, and into the elevator. As the door slid shut, effectively cutting off the sound of Derek's triumphant voice, Evelyn slumped against the metal wall. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The mask dropped. The look of defeat vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp determination. She reached into her purse and pulled out a burner phone, an old model she had kept hidden in the spare tire well of her car for 3 months. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 12 years. It rang once. Twice. "Hello?" A deep, gravelly voice answered. It sounded like power and whiskey. "It's done," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "I'm divorced. I'm free." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low chuckle. "About time, Evelyn. The industry has been boring without you. When can you start tonight?" Evelyn replied, stepping out of the elevator into the lobby. "But Jackson, nobody knows it's me, not yet." "Your secret is safe with me," Jackson Thorne, the billionaire CEO of Thorne Enterprises, replied. "Welcome back to the game, Ghost." 2 weeks had passed since the divorce was finalized. For Derek Vance, life was a continuous stream of champagne congratulations and validation. He felt lighter. Without Evelyn's nagging, which was actually her reminding him of legal compliances he constantly tried to ignore, he felt invincible. He sat in the VIP booth of the Gilded Cage, the city's most exclusive nightclub. Next to him sat Sasha, wearing a dress that cost more than Evelyn's car. She was laughing loudly at his jokes, hanging on his arm and looking at him with wide, adoring eyes. "You're so bad, Derek," Sasha giggled, taking a sip of her martini. "I can't believe you told her she had to be out by noon." "It's business, babe," Derek said, puffing on a cigar. "In business, you cut the dead weight." Evelyn was dead weight. She was holding me back. She didn't understand the vision. She wanted to save money. I wanted to make money. Now, with the merger coming up with Thorne Enterprises, I need to be free to operate. His friend Mark, a fellow executive, clinked his glass against Derek's. "To freedom, and to the Thorne deal. You think you've got it in the bag?" Derek scoffed. "Please. Jackson Thorne is a shark, but he's desperate for our tech. I'm the only game in town. I've got a meeting with his acquisition team next week. I'm going to squeeze them for every penny." Derek didn't mention that the tech he was selling, a predictive algorithm for stock market fluctuations, was actually based on a mathematical model Evelyn had sketched out on a napkin 5 years ago. He had taken it, refined it with his team, and claimed the credit. He had convinced himself that he was the genius. After all, Evelyn was just a housewife with a math degree she never used. She couldn't possibly understand the complexities of what he had built. "What's she doing now?" Mark asked, smirking. "The ex." Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Who cares? Last I heard, she moved into some rinky-dink apartment in the East End. Probably working as a cashier or something. It's better this way. She can live a simple life and I can rule the world." The music pumped louder and Derek felt like a king. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the atmosphere was very different. Evelyn sat in a minimalist high-tech office overlooking the skyline. This wasn't a rinky-dink apartment. It was the penthouse suite of the Thorne Tower, a space accessible only by a private elevator and biometric security. She wasn't wearing her drab gray dress anymore. She was wearing a tailored black power suit, her hair pulled back in a sharp, elegant bun. She stood in front of a massive glass whiteboard covered in complex equations, market trends, and corporate hierarchies. Sitting on the leather sofa behind her was Jackson Thorne. He was 50 years old, handsome in a rugged way, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country, known for destroying his competition. But looking at Evelyn, his expression was one of immense respect. "So," Jackson said, studying the whiteboard, "this is Vance Holdings' projection for Q3. It's a fantasy, Evelyn said, capping her marker. Derek is cooking the books. He's projecting revenue based on the algorithm, but he doesn't know how to update the core code. I wrote the source code, Jackson. Without the patch I designed 6 months ago, the system will start giving false positives by next week. Jackson raised an eyebrow. He doesn't have the patch. No. Evelyn turned a small, cold smile playing on her lips. He never asked for it. He was too busy moving Sasha into the guest bedroom. Jackson laughed. So he's trying to sell me a broken engine. He's trying to sell you a ticking time bomb, Evelyn corrected. He thinks he's walking into a negotiation next week to dictate terms. He has no idea that the ghost consultant you hired to vet the company is me. Jackson stood up and walked over to the window standing beside her. They looked out at the city lights. You know, Evelyn, when you left the finance world 10 years ago to marry him, we all thought you were crazy. You were the brightest analyst on Wall Street. You disappeared. I was in love, Evelyn said, her voice tinged with regret. I thought he was brilliant. I wanted to support him. I poured everything I knew into him. I made him look smart. I made him look competent. I thought we were a team. And he treated you like an accessory. Jackson finished. Worse, Evelyn said. He treated me like I was invisible. He laughed at me, Jackson. In that lawyer's office, he laughed. She tightened her grip on the marker. I don't want to just ruin his deal. I want to dismantle his ego. I want him to know exactly who he threw away. Jackson nodded. The annual Obsidian Gala is this Saturday. It's the biggest event of the season. Anyone will be there. Derek will be there trying to schmooze the board members before the meeting. Evelyn looked at Jackson. I know. I need a date, Jackson said, a mischievous glint in his eye. Someone who knows the industry. Someone elegant. Someone who can help me. Evaluate potential partners. Evelyn finally smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. It wasn't the smile of a victim. It was the smile of a predator. I'd love to go, she said. But I have nothing to wear. Derek kept all my clothes. Jackson pulled a platinum credit card from his pocket and set it on the table. The best stylists in the city are on speed dial. Get whatever you want. And Evelyn? Yes. Don't hold back. If he wants a show, let's give him a blockbuster. The morning of the Obsidian Gala, Evelyn woke up, not in the cramped guest bedroom she had occupied for the last year of her marriage, but in a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like silk against her skin. She sat up, catching her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror across the room. For a second she expected to see the tired woman with the messy bun and the dark circles under her eyes, the woman Derek had called exhausted goods. But the sleep had done wonders. The stress lines that had etched themselves into her forehead were fading. At 10:00 a.m. the doorbell rang. It wasn't a neighbor complaining about noise. It was a team of 5 people led by a man in a sharp tuxedo jacket and ripped jeans. Ms. Vance, he asked, though he quickly corrected himself. Apologies, Ms. Ghost. Mr. Thorne sent us. I am Claude. We are here to excavate the Queen from the ruins. Evelyn smiled. Excavate away, Claude. For the next 6 hours, Evelyn was scrubbed, polished, and painted. It wasn't just a makeover, it was a restoration. As the hairstylist worked, Evelyn closed her eyes and remembered the last time she had tried to dress up for Derek. It was their anniversary 2 years ago. She had bought a red dress, something a little tighter than usual. When she walked into the living room, Derek hadn't complimented her. He had frowned. You look desperate, Evelyn. Red isn't your color. It makes you look flushed. And that cut. You're not 25 anymore. Go change into the black one. We're meeting investors. I need you to look respectable, not like you're hunting for a husband. She had cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes, then changed into the shapeless black sack he preferred. Open your eyes, darling. Claude's voice snapped her back to the present. Evelyn opened them. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. Her hair, usually limp and pulled back, was now a cascade of glossy chestnut waves that framed her face perfectly. Her skin glowed with a luminous warmth. Her eyes, which Derek said were plain brown, were now accentuated with smoky gold and bronze, making them look like pools of amber. But it was the dress that stole the breath from her lungs. Jackson hadn't chosen a safe black gown. He had commissioned a piece from a vanguard designer in Milan. It was a deep, iridescent midnight blue, the color of a stormy ocean. It was strapless, sculpting her body with a corset-like structure before flowing down into a dramatic train that shimmered as if it were woven from crushed sapphires. It featured a slit that went high up her thigh, daring, dangerous, and unapologetic. "The jewelry," Claude whispered, opening a velvet box. Inside sat a necklace of white diamonds and sapphires that looked heavy enough to sink a small boat. "This," Claude said, fastening it around her neck, "is the Star of the North. It's on loan from the vault, value roughly $4 million. Evelyn touched the cold stones. She looked at herself. She didn't look like a housewife. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a weapon. "Do you like it?" A voice came from the doorway. Evelyn turned to see Jackson standing there. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, his bow tie undone, hanging loosely around his neck. He stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, the billionaire who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking looked struck dumb. He cleared his throat, a rare sign of nervousness. "You look—" Jackson started, then shook his head. "Derek Vance is the stupidest man on the face of the earth." Evelyn walked over to him, the heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. She reached up and fixed his bow tie, her movements precise and confident. "He is," Evelyn agreed softly. "But tonight we're not just going to show him what he lost. We're going to show him who he's up against." Jackson offered her his arm. "The car is waiting. Are you ready to burn it down?" Evelyn took his arm. "I brought the matches." The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of black ties, designer gowns, and superficial laughter. This was the Obsidian Gala, where the city's elite came to flaunt their wealth and gossip about who was going broke. Derek Vance stood near the champagne fountain holding court. He loved this environment. He felt like a shark in a tank of goldfish. Sasha was clinging to his bicep, wearing a neon pink dress that was a little too short and a little too bright for the formal elegance of the event. She was currently scrolling through TikTok on her phone board. "So, Derek?" asked Mr. Sterling, a board member of a rival tech firm. "I heard the divorce is final. That must have cost you a pretty penny." Derek laughed, taking a sip of his drink. "Cost me sterling. It was the best investment I ever made. I got off cheap, 50 grand, and she was gone. Honestly, I think she knew she couldn't hack it in my world anymore. Evelyn was simple. She was great when I was starting out in a garage, but at this level you need a partner who understands the lifestyle." He squeezed Sasha closer, though he didn't look at her. "Now I'm free to focus on the Thorne acquisition. Once I close that deal next week, Vance Holdings will be global." "Thorne is a tough nut to crack," Sterling warned. "He's been quiet lately. No one knows what his next move is." "I'm not worried," Derek bragged. "I have the superior tech. He needs me." Suddenly the ambient chatter in the room dropped. It wasn't a gradual silence. It was instant, like someone had cut the power to a speaker system. Heads turned toward the massive double doors at the top of the grand staircase. The paparazzi outside had started flashing their cameras so rapidly it looked like a lightning storm was brewing in the lobby. "Who is that?" Sasha asked, looking up from her phone. Derek turned, annoyed that someone was stealing his spotlight. At the top of the stairs stood Jackson Thorne. That in itself was news. Jackson rarely attended these galas, preferring to stay in the shadows. But no one was looking at Jackson. They were looking at the woman on his arm. She was a vision of midnight blue and diamonds. She stood tall, radiating an aura of cold, untouchable elegance. The way the light caught the sapphires around her neck sent fractured rainbows dancing across the room. She looked like royalty. She looked like a movie star. Derek squinted. The woman looked familiar. The curve of her jaw, the way she held her head high. But it couldn't be. The woman began to descend the stairs, her hand resting lightly on Jackson's arm. She moved with a grace that was hypnotic. "Is that..." Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses. My God. Is that your ex-wife? Derek's stomach dropped. The champagne in his gut turned to acid. No, he stammered. Impossible. Evelyn shops at Target. She drives a 2015 Honda. That woman is wearing half the GDP of a small country. But as they got closer to the bottom of the stairs, the denial shattered. It was her. It was Evelyn. But it wasn't the Evelyn he knew. The Evelyn he knew slumped her shoulders. The Evelyn he knew wore minimal makeup to avoid drawing attention. This woman was devouring the attention. She was making eye contact with the crowd, a small mysterious smile playing on her lips. A murmur ripped through the crowd. Is that Evelyn Vance? I thought he left her with nothing. Look at those diamonds. Is she with Jackson Thorne? Derek felt a surge of irrational anger. How dare she? How dare she look like this? She was supposed to be at home crying over a box of wine. She was supposed to be miserable without him. She looks hot, Sasha said, unaware of the gravity of the situation. Way hotter than the pictures you showed me. Shut up, Sasha, Derek hissed. He couldn't help himself. He abandoned his conversation and pushed through the crowd, heading straight for the bottom of the stairs. He had to take control of the narrative. He had to put her back in her place. Evelyn and Jackson reached the floor. A waiter immediately offered them drinks. Jackson took one and handed it to Evelyn. Evelyn? Derek's voice was too loud, too strident. Evelyn turned slowly. She didn't flinch. She didn't look scared. She looked at him with the mild disinterest one might show a bug on a windshield. Hello, Derek, she said. Her voice was smooth, devoid of the tremor that used to be there when he raised his voice. Derek stopped in front of them, his face flushing red. He looked her up and down, trying to find a flaw, trying to find the frumpy wife he had discarded. He couldn't. What are you doing here? Derek demanded, ignoring Jackson entirely. This is $5,000 a plate. Did you blow your entire alimony check on a ticket? The crowd nearby went silent, listening. Evelyn took a slow sip of her champagne. Actually, I didn't pay for a ticket. I was invited. Invited by who? Derek sneered. You're a nobody, Evelyn. You're a +1 who lost her host. He glanced at Jackson, forcing a slimy smile. Mr. Thorne, I see you've met my ex-wife. I should warn you she's a bit of a gold digger, but I suppose you can afford her rates for the night. It was a crude, disgusting insult. Sasha covered her mouth to hide a giggle. The crowd gasped. Derek waited for Evelyn to crumble. He waited for the tears. Instead, Evelyn laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a genuine, amused sound. She turned to Jackson. You were right, Jackson. He really does lack imagination. Jackson stepped forward, his face like stone. He towered over Derek. Mr. Vance, I suggest you watch your tone. You are speaking to my guest. And more importantly, you are speaking to a woman who has more class in her fingernail than you have in your entire lineage. Derek bristled, his ego bruising. I'm just looking out for you, Thorne. She's playing you. She's probably telling you she's some sort of sophisticated socialite. But she's just a housewife who doesn't know a balance sheet from a grocery list. Evelyn stepped forward, closing the distance between her and Derek. She smelled like expensive jasmine and danger. Is that what you think, Derek? She asked quietly. That I don't know business. I know you don't, Derek scoffed. You made coffee. You didn't make decisions. Interesting, Evelyn mused, because I seem to recall that the Vortex algorithm, the one you're pitching to Jackson next week, was based on a stochastic calculus model I wrote on our honeymoon while you were getting drunk by the pool. Do you still have the original notes, Derek? Or did you burn those too? Derek's face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about. And Evelyn continued, her voice rising just enough for the surrounding circle of heavy hitters to hear, I recall warning you that the server architecture for your cloud platform was unstable if user density exceeded 3 million. Did you fix that, or are you still patching it with temporary code? Derek was stunned. He had never heard her speak like this in public. She was using technical jargon, specific details he barely understood himself because he usually delegated them to his engineers. "Evelyn, stop it," he hissed, dropping his voice. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Derek," Jackson interjected, placing a protective hand on Evelyn's lower back. "She's not embarrassing herself. She's enlightening me. In fact, Evelyn isn't just my date tonight." Jackson paused for effect, looking around the room at the bankers, investors, and CEOs watching the spectacle. "Evelyn is the new Chief Strategy Officer for Thorne Enterprises, and she is personally overseeing the due diligence on the Vance Holdings acquisition." The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Evelyn, really looked at her, and saw the cold intelligence in her eyes that he had chosen to ignore for 10 years. "You," Derek choked out, "you're auditing me." Evelyn smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Derek had ever seen. "I'm not just auditing you, Derek," she whispered. "I'm grading you. And so far you're failing." She turned to Jackson. "I'm bored of this conversation. Shall we dance?" "We shall," Jackson said. They turned their backs on him. As they walked toward the dance floor, the crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. Derek was left standing there holding a warm glass of champagne with Sasha tugging on his sleeve, asking, "Babe, what does Chief Strategy Officer mean?" Derek didn't answer. He watched his ex-wife. The woman he laughed at, the woman he discarded, glide into the arms of a billionaire. And for the first time since the divorce, Derek Vance felt a flicker of genuine primal panic. Monday morning arrived with the weight of a funeral procession for Derek Vance. He stood in the elevator of Thorne Tower watching the floor numbers climb. His ears popped as they passed the 50th floor. Beside him stood his lead attorney, Mr. Henderson, and his chief technology officer, a nervous man named Greg who had been sweating profusely since they parked the car. "Pull yourself together, Greg," Derek snapped, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the elevator doors. "It's just a meeting. We have the leverage. They want the tech." "But Mr. Vance," Greg stammered, clutching his laptop bag, "if she really knows about the kernel instability, if she really wrote the base code, we can't bluff her. I can bluff investors. I can bluff marketing teams. I can't bluff the architect." "She didn't write it," Derek hissed, though his voice lacked conviction. "She dabbled. She helped. I was the visionary. Do not forget who signs your checks." The elevator dinged at the top floor. They were ushered into a conference room that looked more like a war room. The table was a slab of black obsidian. The view was panoramic, showing the entire city beneath them, a visual reminder of who held the power here. Jackson Thorne sat at the far end of the table, looking relaxed, flipping through a file. But the seat at the head of the table, the seat of authority, was occupied by Evelyn. She wore a white suit today, sharp and clinical. If the blue dress at the gala was about allure, this suit was about sterilization. She looked like a surgeon preparing to cut out a tumor. "Gentlemen," Evelyn said, not standing up. She gestured to the empty chairs opposite her. "Please sit." Derek sat, trying to reclaim some dominance by sprawling his legs out. "Let's make this quick, Evelyn. I know you're trying to play hardball to get back at me for the divorce, but this is business. My time is expensive." "Your time is borrowed," Evelyn corrected calmly. She tapped a tablet in front of her. The massive screen on the wall flickered to life. It displayed the logo of Vance Holdings, followed by a series of complex red graphs trending downward. "We've reviewed your proposal for the acquisition." Evelyn began, her voice professional and detached. "You're asking for $200 million for the proprietary Vortex algorithm and the accompanying client list." "A bargain," Derek said. "It predicts market volatility with 98% accuracy." 98% accuracy historically, Evelyn amended. "But let's look at the predictive stability for the future." She swiped her finger on the tablet. The screen changed to display lines of code. It was dense, complex, and filled with highlighted sections in red. Greg, the CTO, audibly gasped. "This," Evelyn said, pointing to a block of code, is the recursive loop that handles high-frequency trading data. Greg, would you like to explain to Derek what happens when the user load exceeds 3 million simultaneous queries? Greg looked at Derek, then at Evelyn. He swallowed hard. The latency buffer overflows. And, Evelyn pressed. And it triggers a cascade failure, Greg whispered, staring at his shoes. The system doesn't just slow down. It hallucinates. It starts inventing data to fill the gaps. It would cause a market crash for anyone using it. Derek slammed his hand on the table. Greg, shut up. That's a minor bug. We can patch it in a week. You can't patch it, Evelyn said, her eyes locking onto Derek's. Because the flaw isn't in the interface. It's in the mathematical foundation. I know, Derek, because I wrote the warning note in the margin of the original notebook 5 years ago. You ignored it. She pressed a button. A scanned image of a handwritten notebook page appeared on the screen. It was Evelyn's handwriting. In the margin, circled in red ink, were the words, "Do not scale without rewriting the core integer sequence. Will result in catastrophic data corruption." You didn't build a product, Derek, Evelyn said softly. You built a facade. You took my rough draft and sold it as a finished masterpiece. And now you're trying to sell Jackson a bomb that's about to explode. Derek felt the sweat trickling down his back. This is irrelevant. We have the client base. We have the contracts. Ah, the contracts, Evelyn said, a cruel smile touching her lips. Let's talk about Vortex Solutions. The screen changed again. This time it showed bank statements. Wire transfers. Dates and times. Mr. Henderson, Evelyn addressed Derek's lawyer, you're a man of the law. What is the legal term for channeling company profits into a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands to artificially lower the company's valuation during a divorce proceeding? Mr. Henderson stiffened. He began to pack his briefcase. Mr. Vance, I was not aware of these accounting structures. I think I need to recuse myself from this meeting to review my ethical obligations. Sit down, Henderson, Derek shouted. She's bluffing. These are fake. They are verified by the IRS as of this morning. Jackson spoke up for the first time. His voice was deep and rumbling. We sent over the packet an hour ago. I imagine federal auditors are arriving at your office right about now. Derek stood up, his chair clattering back against the wall. You called the feds? I didn't, Jackson said, gesturing to Evelyn. My chief strategy officer did. She has a fiduciary duty to report fraud when she finds it during due diligence. Evelyn stood up slowly. She walked around the table until she was standing inches from Derek. He was shaking. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by the terrified look of a trapped animal. You told me I wouldn't survive a day in the real world, Evelyn whispered. You told me I was a parasite. She leaned in closer. I wasn't the parasite, Derek. I was the host. I fed you. I gave you the ideas. I fixed your mistakes. And the moment you cut me off, you started to starve. Look at you. You're hollow. Evelyn, please. Derek's voice cracked. He looked at the door, then back at her. We can work this out. I can give you shares. I can give you half the company back. Just stop the audit. Call them off. I don't want your company, Derek, Evelyn said, walking back to her seat. It's worthless. The code is broken. The money is gone. And your reputation is about to be incinerated. She sat down and looked at Jackson. My recommendation is a hard pass on the acquisition. Vance Holdings is a liability. Agreed, Jackson said, closing his file. Meeting adjourned. Derek stood there for a moment, stunned. Greg and Mr. Henderson had already fled the room. He was alone with the two people who had just dismantled his entire life in under 20 minutes. Get out, Jackson said, his voice dropping to a growl. Derek stumbled out of the room, his legs feeling like jelly. As the heavy doors closed behind him, he heard something that cut deeper than any insult. He heard Evelyn laughing. But this time she wasn't laughing at his pain. She was laughing with relief. She was laughing because she was finally truly free. The fall of Derek Vance was not a slow decline. It was a vertical drop. By the time Derek got back to his office, the FBI was already there boxing up files. The employees' people he had bullied and underpaid for years were standing around watching, not a single one of them looking sympathetic. In fact, his secretary was recording the raid on her phone. Derek hid in his private office, locking the door. He poured himself a drink, his hands shaking so badly he spilled scotch all over his pants. His phone buzzed. It was Sasha. "Hey, so I saw the news online. Something about fraud. Look, I'm going to stay at my sister's for a while. Also, I think we should see other people. You're a little too intense for me. Don't call me." Derek threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. "They can't do this," he muttered to himself, pacing the room. "I'm Derek Vance. I'm a genius." But the genius had a problem. The Vortex system, the one currently running the portfolios of his remaining clients, was flashing red on his monitor. System error. Recursive loop detected. Latency critical. It was happening. Exactly as Evelyn had predicted. The system was crashing. If it went down, his clients would lose millions in seconds. He would be sued into oblivion. He would go to prison not just for fraud, but for negligence. He needed the patch. He needed the code Evelyn had mentioned. He scrambled to his computer, trying to find the old files, the ones she had worked on. He searched the cloud, the backup drives. Nothing. He had deleted her user profile the day of the divorce to be petty. He had wiped her existence from the company servers. "No, no, no!" he screamed, banging on the keyboard. He had erased the only person who could save him. Desperation clawed at his throat. He had to see her. He had to beg. He would get on his knees if he had to. It was raining by the time he reached the parking garage of Thorn Tower that evening. He didn't have an appointment, and security wouldn't let him up, so he waited. He stood by the exit ramp, soaked to the bone, watching the luxury cars roll out. At 8:00 p.m., a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb. The back window rolled down. Evelyn sat inside, dry, warm, and looking at him with pitying eyes. Derek ran over to the window. "Evelyn, Evelyn, wait!" "Driver, hold on," Evelyn said. Derek gripped the window frame, water dripping from his nose. "Evelyn, the system is crashing. It's the loop. You were right. It's all going red. I need the fix. Please. I know you have it in your head. Just tell me the integer sequence. I'll give you anything." "You have nothing to give Derek," Evelyn said calmly. "The feds froze your assets an hour ago." I... Derek sobbed, the fight completely leaving him. "I'm going to prison, Evelyn. They're going to destroy me. We were married for 10 years. Doesn't that mean anything? I was your husband." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the man she had wasted a decade on. "You were my husband," she agreed. "And when I needed you, when I was sick, when I was lonely, when I was grieving my mother, where were you, Derek? You were at the office. Or with Sasha. Or laughing at me for being needy." "I'm sorry," Derek wailed. "I was an idiot. I'm sorry. Help me." "I can't help you," Evelyn said. "Not because I don't want to, but because it wouldn't matter." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. She handed it to him through the window. "What is this?" Derek asked, squinting in the rain. "That is a copyright registration," Evelyn explained. "Dated 5 years ago. Registered under my maiden name, Evelyn Costas. It covers the source code for the stochastic modeling engine." Derek's eyes went wide. "You see, Derek," she continued, her voice hard as diamond, "you didn't just steal my ideas. You stole my intellectual property. Every dollar you made using that algorithm was theft. If I fix it for you, I'm an accomplice. If I let it crash, I'm just a bystander watching a thief crash a stolen car." Derek stared at the paper. It was the nail in his coffin. She had trapped him years ago simply by being smart enough to protect herself even when she loved him. Why? Derek whispered. Why did you register it? You trusted me back then. I loved you, Evelyn corrected. But my father taught me one thing. Never build a house on land you don't own. I owned the code, Derek. You just rented it. And the lease is up. She tapped the glass partition. Drive on. The window rolled up. Evelyn. No Ilara. Derek chased the car for a few steps, but he slipped on the wet pavement and fell hard onto the asphalt. He lay there in the rain, clutching the copyright document that proved his entire empire was a lie. As the taillights of the limousine faded into the city traffic, Derek realized the cruelest twist of all. He hadn't just lost his wife. He hadn't just lost his money. He had lost to the one person he had underestimated his entire life. He rolled onto his back and looked up at the stormy sky. For the first time in his life, he wasn't laughing. He was weeping. 6 months is a long time in the business world, but it is an eternity inside the Federal Correctional Institution at Otisville. Derek Vance, inmate number 89402, sat on the edge of a plastic bunk that smelled faintly of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies. The man who had once worn $3,000 Italian suits was now clad in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit that chafed against his skin. His hair, once styled by the city's best barbers, was now shorn close to his skull, revealing the gray roots he had spent years dying to hide. His empire had not just crumbled, it had been vaporized. The trial had been swift and brutal. The evidence Evelyn had provided, the copyright registrations, the handwritten notes proving he knew about the fatal flaws in the code, the bank records of his offshore accounts, was insurmountable. His lawyer, Mr. Henderson, had turned state's witness in exchange for immunity, laying bare every dirty trick Derek had ever pulled. Derek had lost everything. His assets were seized, his reputation was incinerated, and his friends had scattered like cockroaches when the lights turned on. Sasha, the intern he had left Evelyn for, had sold her story to a streaming service for a docuseries titled The Fraud of Wall Street, painting herself as a naive victim of his controlling narcissism. But the worst part wasn't the prison food or the hard mattress. It was the Tuesday afternoon ritual. Every Tuesday at 4:00 p.m. the inmates in Block C were allowed 1 hour of television time in the common room. For most, it was a chance to watch sports or sitcoms. For Derek, it was a form of masochistic torture. He watched the business news, desperate for a glimpse of the world he had been exiled from. "Yo, Vance!" a burly inmate named Miller shouted, throwing a crumpled wrapper at Derek's head. "Your ex-wife is on again. She looking expensive." Derek's head snapped up. On the screen, the logo for CNBC flashed, followed by the headline, "The Phoenix Rises Thorn and Costas Breaks Q4 Records." The camera cut to a live feed. It wasn't a boardroom. It was a construction site. But it wasn't just any construction site. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. He knew those iron gates. He knew that winding driveway lined with imported oak trees. It was his estate. The Hampton mansion he had fought so hard to keep in the divorce settlement, the symbol of his success, the place where he had told Evelyn to get out by noon. A reporter stood in front of the gates holding a microphone against the wind. "We are live from the former Vance estate," the reporter announced, her voice crisp. "For months, speculation has swirled regarding the fate of this $50 million property following the federal seizure. Today, the deed was finally transferred at auction." Derek leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the bench. He hoped a Saudi prince had bought it. Or maybe a tech rival like Zuckerberg. Someone who would appreciate the marble floors and the custom wine cellar. "The winning bidder," the reporter continued, "is none other than Evelyn Costas." The common room went silent. Even the other prisoners seemed to sense the poetic justice of the moment. "She bought my house," Derek whispered, a confused smile touching his lips. She wants to live there. She misses me. That has to be it. She wants to be surrounded by my memory." For a second his delusion returned. He convinced himself that Evelyn was still the sentimental broken woman he had discarded. Then the camera panned to the left. Evelyn walked into the frame. She looked breathtaking. She wore a hard hat over her glossy chestnut hair and a tailored cream trench coat that screamed quiet luxury. She didn't look like a woman mourning a lost love. She looked like a conqueror surveying captured territory. Next to her stood Jackson Thorne. The billionaire looked relaxed, his hands in the pockets of a dark wool coat, standing guard beside her like a silent sentinel. "Ms. Costas," the reporter asked, thrusting the microphone forward, "you purchased this estate for a fraction of its value. Are you planning to move in? Is this an attempt to reclaim the home you were kicked out of?" Evelyn looked at the mansion behind her, the sprawling structure of stone and glass that Derek had loved more than he had ever loved her. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone holding a detonator. "Move in." Evelyn laughed, the sound light and airy. "Absolutely not. The foundation is rotten. The architecture is gaudy. And frankly, the energy here is stagnant." She turned to the camera, her amber eyes locking onto the lens. "I didn't buy this house to live in it," Evelyn declared, her voice steady and powerful. "I bought it to bury it." She raised her hand and signaled to someone off camera. A low rumble shook the speakers of the prison TV. Behind Evelyn, 3 massive yellow bulldozers roared to life. As Derek watched in horror, the first wrecking ball swung through the air. Crash. It smashed into the master bedroom window, the very room where Derek had laughed at her tears while packing his bags for a business trip with Sasha. The glass shattered, cascading down like diamonds, followed by the collapse of the brick wall. "No!" Derek screamed, jumping to his feet. "Stop, that's imported Italian marble!" Miller, the inmate behind him, burst out laughing. "Sit down, Vance. She's remodeling." On the screen, Evelyn didn't even flinch at the sound of destruction. She continued speaking over the noise of Derek's legacy turning into dust. "We are breaking ground today on the Costas Innovation Center," Evelyn explained. "This land will no longer be a monument to greed. It will be a tuition-free academy for women in STEM, women who have been overlooked, underestimated, and silenced. We are going to teach them to write code, to build algorithms, and most importantly, to own their intellectual property." She paused, allowing the irony to sink in. "I want to ensure that no woman ever has to fear losing her livelihood just because she lost a partner. We are building a future where talent cannot be stolen." Derek sank back onto the bench. She wasn't just destroying his house. She was salting the earth. She was turning his monument of vanity into a school designed to prevent men like him from ever existing again. The reporter turned to Jackson. "Mr. Thorne, you're known for your ruthless business acquisitions. Is this a personal investment for you?" Jackson looked at Evelyn. The look on his face was so full of adoration it was almost painful to watch. "It's personal," Jackson admitted, his deep voice rumbling. "Because I nearly missed out on the most brilliant mind of our generation because she was hiding in someone else's shadow. I'm just here to make sure the light stays on her." The wrecking balls continued to swing in the background, a symphony of destruction. Dust clouds rose into the air, obscuring the remains of the Vance mansion. Then the final twist happened. Jackson turned to Evelyn, ignoring the news crew, ignoring the millions of people watching live. He took her hand. "Evelyn," Jackson said, his voice dropping an octave, "you've rebuilt your life. You've rebuilt your career. And now you're rebuilding this land." He reached into his coat pocket. Derek stopped breathing. "Don't do it," he hissed at the screen. "Yeet. Don't you dare." Jackson dropped to one knee in the dirt and debris of the driveway. He pulled out a box. Inside sat a diamond that made the ones Derek used to buy look like broken glass. It was a radiant cut yellow diamond, rare and vibrant, just like her. "I don't want to be your boss anymore," Jackson said loud enough for the microphone to catch. "And I don't want to be just your partner. I want to be your husband. I want to build something with you that no one can ever tear down. Evelyn Costas, will you marry me? Evelyn covered her mouth with her hands. For the first time since the divorce, her composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, not tears of pain, but of overwhelming joy. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Jackson stood up and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as the workers on the bulldozers honked their horns in celebration. The reporter was clapping. The cameraman zoomed in on the ring. It was a perfect cinematic ending. In the prison common room, the inmates erupted into cheers. Even the guards were smiling. That's a real man right there, Miller said, clapping Derek hard on the back, nearly knocking the wind out of him. Looks like you were just the warm-up act, Vance. Derek stared at the screen. He saw the woman he had called boring and plain, looking radiant in the arms of a billionaire who treated her like a queen. He saw his mansion, his pride and joy, reduced to a pile of rubble in the background. He realized then that Evelyn hadn't taken revenge. Revenge implies anger, and anger implies attachment. This was something far worse. This was indifference. She had moved so far beyond him that destroying his house was just a tax write-off for her. She was happy. She was successful. She was loved. And he was just a ghost in an orange jumpsuit watching her life from a cage he had built for himself. The guard walked over and switched off the TV. The screen went black, leaving Derek staring at his own faint, hollow reflection in the glass. He opened his mouth to say something, to make a joke, to defend himself, to tell everyone that he used to be somebody. But no words came out. There was nothing left to say. He turned around and walked back to his cell, the sound of Evelyn's happy laughter still ringing in his ears, louder and more permanent than the slamming of the iron bars behind him. And that is the story of how Evelyn turned her pain into power. Derek thought he could break her by taking away his money, but he forgot that true wealth comes from intelligence, resilience, and self-worth. In the end, the best revenge wasn't destroying him, it was outgrowing him completely. What do you think? Did Derek deserve to lose everything, or was Evelyn too harsh in the end? And have you ever had someone underestimate you, only to prove them wrong later? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Until next time, remember, be careful who you laugh at today, because they might be the ones signing your checks tomorrow. Thanks for watching.